Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today you're checking out my Magicka Nightblade PVP build updated for Summerset. This is the Predator build, and it's a great all-around Magicka Nightblade build. Really high damage and survivability, really good solo and group potential as well. So let's get right into it. We'll check out the sets and some different options that you have, skills, champion points, and all the rest coming up next. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into the stats on the build first. Checking out the stat page. So 39, almost 40k Magicka, 18k health, that'll jump up to about 22-ish, 23 in PvP. 15k stamina, really strong. I try to hit that mark on most of my Magicka builds in PvP. A little bit less is okay, but you do want enough stamina for sprinting, breaking free, roll dodging, etc. Recoveries are a little bit low, but we have different ways of boosting that. So about 1k Magicka recovery, 850 stam recovery. Weapon damage 2.1k, spell critical 51%. Let's go ahead and use a potion just to buff that up a little bit. So the spell damage does jump up to about 2600, and then we do have an infused weapon damage glyph on the back, so we'll be over 3k, no problem. The spell critical is really nice, 51%. It's a very important part of the build. And then resistances are pretty standard for light armor, about 9 and 7k there. We've got 64 points into stamina. I am a vampire on this build. It is nice because you get the extra stamina and Magicka recovery. You also move quicker while sneaking, so that does help the build. You can do the build without vampire though, so I wouldn't say it's required, but it does have some nice perks. We're using the purple tri-stat food just to, like I said, get that stamina really high. And then our Mundus Stone is the lover for the extra spell penetration, which equates to extra damage. Race here on the build, I went with the High Elf. You could also choose Dark Elf. That would be a good option. Another interesting option would be the Argonian race. You get that extra sustain from potions. And speaking of potions, what we're using on the build, Essence of Detection. This is going to give you spell damage, which is important. We don't have a spell damage buff. It's going to give you Magicka back, and then just the extra bonus here is you get 15 seconds of stealth detection. Now you don't need this necessarily, but I think it does help with finding other Nightblades on the field. And if you don't have the money or the items to build those, you can just use the basic Alliance War potions, because those will give you what you basically need, which is the Magicka and the spell power buff. And on to the gear sets next. So we're starting with 5 pieces of the Julianos set, and the reason why I chose this is it's just really good balanced stats overall. You can see we have spell critical, max Magicka spell critical, and then the 5th piece gives us about 300 spell damage. Now this is the base set that I've used for the build, but you can try other things. I know some Nightblades like to use War Maiden as a set. War Maiden is okay. The only problem that I had with this really is the spell damage only applies to your Magicka abilities, so yes, it would buff your funnel and it would buff your cripple and things like that, but it won't buff light attacks at all, and we do a lot of light attacks on the build. So I wanted to go with something that was just overall, it's going to buff everything. This would also buff our healing, so the fact that the spell damage applies to everything, I think is ideal for the build. You can go with other things, but I'm choosing Julianos as the first set. For our second 5-piece set, we're using the Shroud of the Lich, and we've got 3 pieces of jewelry for Lich, and then we have a Restoration Staff back bar for that. So basically this only procs on the back bar. So let's look at what it does. We have Magicka Recovery, Max Magicka, Magicka Recovery, really good. And then on our back bar, when we drop below 33%, we get about an extra 1,000 Magicka Recovery. So this buffs our Magicka Recovery through the roof. Basically, you can get close to 3,500, 4,000 Magicka Recovery while this is active. So we have a lot of Magicka, we have a high Magicka pool to begin with, which is going to sustain you for quite a while, and then once you drop below 33%, basically proc this, and it'll help you get your Magicka back up. So again, that is jewelry and back bar on the restoration staff. For the monster set, I really still like Valkynscoria for Magicka Nightblade just because we are using damage over time effects. And we also get a nice health bonus. And this flame damage meteor is still basically undodgeable, so it's a really nice monster set for the Magicka Nightblade. Great for PvP. Now in Summerset, the fact that staffs count for 2, this gives us an extra 2-piece on the front, so I went with the Willpower Inferno staff on the front bar. This gives us a very nice 1,400 maximum Magicka bonus. And then we are doing poisons here just to help us proc that Valkynscoria, because like I said, that procs off our dots. In terms of the glyphs and enchants, for the main hand, I think the Nerdhone trait is going to be your best bet. It'll help you get a little bit extra spell damage. And since we're using poisons here, we don't really need infused. For the back bar, you can use defending, you can do infused, either one would be good. And then for the body pieces, Impen is going to be a very good trait. We are not using shields on the build. You can also mix in things like infused and well-fitted. I do still like well-fitted in Battlegrounds especially because sprint cost is really high on a Magicka character, so having a couple well-fitted thrown in is a big help as well. And then for the jewelry, I actually brought in 1 stamina recovery glyph. That's just going to help with sprinting and maintaining our stamina pool overall. And then 2 spell damage. And these are all arcane. So let's check out the skills next. And this is where things get a little different, a little interesting. So first up, Merciless Resolve. This is your minor berserk buff. 8% extra damage, so you want to make sure this is up 100% if you can. On 5 light attacks, you get a nice big bow proc, about 17k there on the tooltip unbuffed. So this is massive, and why not Impale? Well, I actually think this does more damage, and it does the damage 100% of the time. You don't have to wait for the target to be 20% health or lower. So I do use this instead of Impale. If you're really into Impale, go for it, but I think this is the better skill, and I didn't have enough slots for both. So I run Merciless instead of Impale. Next up, Flame Reach. This is our stun from a range. Does a decent bit of damage up front, damage over time, and a knockback and stun. So it is a little bit pricey. If you're running the Master Inferno staff, you can bring that down, and it would be a really nice buff, actually. But just make sure you don't spam this. You're going to use it in combination with, let's say, your bow proc to finish somebody off, or with your ultimate. Next up is Inner Light, and this is great on the Magicka Nightblade because we already get a lot of buffs to Magicka. So this, you can see on the stats, this puts us close to 40k, which is really nice in PvP. It also gives you the spell crit bonus, which we don't have in our potion that we're using. So this is great, perfect to have on the front bar. And we had room for it, so why not? Swallow Soul, I use this over Funnel Health because I think the extra healing on Funnel Health is just so small, it's not really worth it. But the Minor Vitality buff on yourself is pretty good. It's going to buff any incoming heal over time that you have on yourself. So I prefer that. Shadowy Disguise, this is our cloak. It guarantees a critical strike on the next direct damage attack. So think about comboing this offensively with, let's say, your Swallow Soul. That'll make sure you have a guaranteed crit on that. You can also combo it with your bow proc when that's ready for a guaranteed huge damage spike. And then obviously this is also your defensive escape tool. So if things are not going well or the fight's starting to turn against you, definitely cloak up and get out of there as soon as possible. For the ultimate, I actually ended up changing this morph in Summerset, and it's been a blast using the Shatter Soul morph over the typical morph. And how this is different is if you kill a target with this ultimate, it creates an explosion, an AoE explosion for pretty big damage, 13k unbuff there on the tooltip. So I like this. It makes me think about how I want to use the skill. I will try to execute a single player if they're around other players, and then I'll get that nice AoE damage, and it'll actually help me finish off other people at the same time. So it's really fun to use. You do have to think about how you're using it though. If you are a newer player, I'm going to say choose the other morph instead. The other morph is going to do significantly more damage and help you burst down a single target. But if you want to try a challenge, try Shatter Soul and figuring out how to use that against groups. It's pretty fun. On the back bar, this is our restoration staff. I'm using Debilitate instead of Cripple. This is just kind of something that I prefer, and you might want to think about it too if you play a lot of Magicka Nightblade. What I've noticed basically is that if an enemy gets crippled, they'll tend to roll dodge right away, and yes, that wastes their stamina, which is good. But for me, I'm going to follow up my cripple with some offensive skills, and if they're already roll dodging, well, guess what? They might be also dodging my flame reach, or they might dodge my bow proc, and I don't want that. So with Debilitate, the nice thing about that is the damage is the same, the dot damage is the same, but it doesn't do the immobilize. So a lot of targets don't even know that this is on them until their health starts getting low, or I get that Valken Scoria to proc off of the damage over time. So I prefer this morph. You also get 100% Magicka back for the Summerset patch. So this is a nice buff to the skill. Next up, we've got Purge, and I think this is essential in Summerset. I've added this to the build to help counteract slows. It's really good. So you want to hit Purge before going into your cloak or getting away from enemies before doing your heals. Make sure you have any major dots purged off of you. It's a lifesaver for sure, removing 2 negative effects and reducing the duration of further negative effects. Really nice buff. Shadow Image, I used this a couple times in the intro clips, and this is just basically, you know, redirect tool. So get your opponents chasing you one way, then summon the shade back the opposite direction, get away, go into cloak, whatever. It's a fake out tool basically. Me personally, I need to remember to always put this down. You should always have this down before starting a fight. Think about your escape route, because on this build I'm not using shield anymore, so escaping, getting into cloak is essential. Healing Ward is the only really big heal on this build, and you can combine this Healing Ward into cloak just to get a guaranteed crit heal. It'll heal you to full if you're almost dead. It's pretty awesome as far as how much healing you can get out of this when it crits. So definitely essential to the build. And then Siphoning Attacks, this last spot, kind of a flex spot, I think. I prefer Siphoning Attacks because my Magicka recovery is pretty low, and the fact that we're doing lots of light attacks to proc our Merciless Bow means you'll be getting lots of Magicka back for using Siphoning Attacks. Now you can also use other things here. One thing I did try was the Psijic Order skill Channeled Acceleration. So you can use that pretty well on the Nightblade because we already get bonuses to crit damage. But like I said, I just preferred having Siphoning Attacks here because it helps with Magicka Sustain. In your back bar, I like Soul Tether. This is just an AoE stun and heal. You can really choose whatever you want here. Alright, so let's check out the champion points next. And you guys know me, I play mostly Battlegrounds, which is non-CP, but I think this is a pretty good setup overall, pretty balanced. So 37 into Warlord, 31 into Sprinter, 4 into Siphoner, just some extra points that we had left over. 7 in tenacity, and we basically don't do heavy attacks very often, so points would be wasted there. 56 into Arcanist, 37 Mooncalf because we do want stamina recovery. 34 Shadow Ward, 44 Tumbling. Over on the blue side, we've got 32 Blessed, 26 Elfborn, 49 Elemental, and 17 into Spell Erosion. Then 25 Staff Expert, 51 Master at Arms, 13 into Shattering Blows, 37 into Thaw. And then in the red, 51 Ironclad, 70 Resistant. This was just extra points. What's nice is you can pump this up and then wear more well-fitted, which will really help you with sprint costs and roll dodging. 49 Hardy, 43 Elemental. Thick-skinned, we do have the Purge skill, and we have our Cloak, which negates dots. 5 into Expert, and 32 into Quick Recovery. Alright, so how do you play the build? Well, obviously you want to make sure your buffs are up, and this is one of the trickier parts because your buffs are on 20-second durations, really short. But make sure you keep up Siphoning on the back bar, Merciless on the front. That'll cover you for buffs. And then obviously we talked about having your shade down. Keeping your shade kind of out of the way is a good tip. So then, starting off, we want to do a light attack on the Restoration Staff, and that's going to proc our weapon damage. Once you do that light attack, you'll want to go into a Debilitate, just to get your dots going. And then from there, basically just switch to your front bar. Once you switch to the front bar, you can do a couple of things. You can just go into Swallow Soul, or you can go right into a stun. So it kind of depends on your target. If your target has a lot of health, you're going to want to weave a couple of light attacks and Swallow Souls just to get them down further. If they're really low, though, you can just do a Flame Reach into your ultimate, or if you have your bow proc ready, you can finish them off with that. So again, light attack, Debilitate, and then we'll just weave a little bit. That's your main source of damage. Okay. So let's say that you have your bow ready to go. Light attack, Debilitate, and this is where you can stun into your Merciless. Done. Not a lot of people will be able to survive that. And then you can do a similar thing like we said with the ultimate. So make sure you have ultimate. And then it'll just be something like Flame Reach, ultimate. Very simple. Alright everybody, that about wraps it up for this PvP Magicka Nightblade build. Hope you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two. For me, I think the Magicka Nightblade is probably one of the most challenging classes to learn, but also probably the most rewarding. So if you're new to the class, try out the build, give it a shot, and stick with it. Don't give up. Once you learn how to keep up your buffs and survive in the solo environment, you'll just keep getting better and better. If you're new to the channel, please think about hitting that subscribe button. It is free, and I do post new videos every week, so hitting that subscribe helps me out, and you'll get the latest content as it gets created. And until then, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.